Hello, and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. My name is Cecilia, and on behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you joined us for today's Battery and Precious Metals presentations. Our next live presentation comes from Avalon Advanced Materials. Before I introduce our speaker, a few points to note. Please submit your questions in the question box to the left of the slides. If you're interested in scheduling a meeting with Avalon Advanced Materials, please click on the Meetings tab found on the left navigation bar. You will be able to view the company's availability and submit a meeting request. On a final note, all today's presentations will be recorded and available for 24/7 replay. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Don Bubar, President and CEO of Avalon Advanced Materials, which trades on the OTCQB venture market under the symbol AVLNF and on the TSX under the symbol AVL. Welcome, Don.
Thanks very much for having me join this presentation. So this is the title slide, and I always like to emphasize how we saw the future with lithium over 25 years ago, and now its time has finally come. We first started doing exploration on this site back in 1997-98 and did all the original drilling there. So I'll see during that time period, and I'll show you some historic slides that show some details on the geology. Next slide is remind you about all the forward-looking statements I'll be making. And this is some corporate information. We're still fairly well funded, but we're now looking for additional financing to finance the acquisition of the site in Thunder Bay that we want to acquire to build the lithium battery materials refinery on. And I always like to emphasize that we've been producing annual sustainability reports for 11 years now. And this is because we learned early on, if you're going to produce materials for clean technology, many of the end users will audit their supply chains and make sure they're produced in sustainable ways. So that was what motivated us to get into that space a while ago. And then we just got a Sustainalytics ESG risk rating in 2021, and it was an excellent rating. So hopefully that'll inspire more ESG investors to take an interest in our business going forward here. And this is our asset base. And of course, our Separation Rapids lithium project is our top priority right now. And we have another lithium project in Northern Ontario too, called Lilypad, which is exceptionally enriched in cesium and tantalum as well as lithium. And our rare earth project was one thing we are well remembered for in the U.S. because we almost got it going about 12 years ago. And to this day, I think China saw us coming and that motivated them to relax the export quotas they had imposed on Japan and Korea. But a few years ago, we brought in an Australian partner and gave them ownership of the near surface resources. And they're doing a really good job on getting the whole ball rolling there for us. And that was the idea. If they could get everything started there and motivate creating the more complete supply chain on rare earths, that we would be inspired to develop the original resource that we did the feasibility study on. back in 2013. And they're doing a good job. And they're now producing or constructing a plant in Saskatoon that can take the concentrates they produce and make a mixed rare earth product. And they have inspired the Saskatchewan Research Council to create the separation capacity there and also a manufacturing capacity for making the magnet metals. So they have done a really good job on getting the whole thing started in Canada to produce rare earth elements. And then we're also trying to get closed mine sites reactivated. The East Kemptville project in Nova Scotia is a pretty good example of a closed mine site where there's a lot of waste there, and they're full of other elements, including tin, indium, copper, zinc, and lithium that can be recovered from the waste while you fully remediate the long-term liability there. So I'm trying to inspire interest in closed mine sites for a while now, and it's taken a while to get it started because BHP, after they had the Brazilian tailings dam failure, decided, no, you're not allowed to do anything there. But hopefully we'll be able to get the provincial government to step in there and help us get the whole ball rolling there, because it was the only example of a primary tin resource in North American history, and tin is now an important technology metal as well. And this is a slide I like to use to clarify on how producing these non-traditional commodities, now known as critical minerals, is a very different business from the traditional mining industry. I like to refer to it as an advanced manufacturing business because it's all about how you can design an appropriate extraction process to make the product that will meet the needs of the end users. And this was a totally foreign concept to the traditional mining industry in Canada, where it was only ever about making the operation as big as you possibly could so you could keep your average costs down. But I've been trying to advocate too that the first step in trying to show how you can make a derivative product that will meet the needs of the end users is taking a bulk sample early on. Of course, that's been treated as the last step before you start a giant open pit mine. But Canada is now trying to inspire more cutting the red tape to help advance these non-traditional commodities supply chains getting started here. And in Ontario, there's been a first ever critical mineral strategy created, and these are some of the main elements of it. And one thing they've done is to attract some of the end users of battery materials like LG Energy Solution and Stellantis to set up facilities for making electric vehicles and the battery operation there too. So I think they were able to attract their interest by promising that Ontario has lots of lithium pegmatite resources and it'll be no problem creating this full supply chain. But the important next step is on creating the midstream processing capacity to produce the lithium battery materials, and we're now in the process of getting that started now and improving the regulatory framework to recognize how this is a very different business from traditional mining. So this is the location of our project in Northwestern Ontario, about 60 kilometers north of Kenora, Ontario, and it's in the traditional territory of the Wapsimaang Independent Nations, who we've been talking to for many, many years, going back to 1999 when we first signed an MOU. And I really want to make sure they get involved in the development of the project. As I often try to emphasize, there's nothing in a lithium pegmatite resource that creates a hazard for the environment. In fact, when lithium gets in the water, it's good for human health. So hopefully we'll get production started fairly soon, and we're going to treat it as a growth business going forward. We're going to start off at a modest scale and then start to scale up as we see how much demand there is for the various products that we can start to produce. And I always like to remind people that this is a rare type of lithium, cesium, tantalum, pegmatite, and that the main lithium minerals in the resource are petalite and lepidolite. And petalite is huge demand now because it's very short supply, and it's always been used to introduce lithium into the batch formulation for high-strength glass ceramic products. And we hopefully will recover the lepidolite and design a process to make the lithium battery materials from that. We now have lots of demand for the petalite for high-strength glass ceramic products. And there are a number of other minerals in the resource that can be recovered too as byproducts, including rubidium-rich K feldspars and tantalum minerals, and potentially cesium as well. So I always like to emphasize just how important this mineral petalite is as a way to introduce lithium into the batch formulation. Corning used it to invent Corningware cookware, and now there's been a lot of innovation on other types of high-strength glass products that every major manufacturer really wants to have a supply of petalite to introduce it into the batch formulation. And now it's in very short supply after China took control of the one traditional supply source in Zimbabwe. And now there's a global shortage, and we now have the only significant petalite resource in the world that China doesn't control. So every major glass ceramic manufacturer is begging us to hurry up and create a new supply. So this is our land position on this slide. The original resource called the Big Whopper is on the mining lease on the east side of the property, but it occurs within a belt that also has other lithium pegmatites in it. And we made a new discovery last year of another pegmatite that's also really enriched in the rare lithium mineral petalite. And hopefully we'll be able to start drilling once we get a permit on that to prove up that could be another significant resource. And this is a picture of it. It's quite a large outcrop area. And the petalite in this resource is very, very coarse grained, which will make it easier to recover for the applications in high-strength glass ceramic products. So hopefully we'll be able to get going on drilling it this summer. So these are some old slides from when we were known as Avalon Ventures Limited. And I wanted to show how this resource has lots of potential for increasing the size of the resource. The original Big Whopper is on the east side, but there's a tail on it that sticks out to the west, and we don't know how big that might be at depth there. So we want to do more exploration to find out just how big this resource might ultimately be. And we now are in the process of doing some deeper drilling on the main body of the pegmatite just to see what the size potential is, because we never found a bottom to it. We tested down to about 250 meters, but it's open to depth for expansion, and we're now in the process of doing some deeper drilling there just to see what the ultimate size potential is there. And this is a long section of the resource there. Originally, we were going to start off at a small scale because we only had one potential buyer, that was Corning. But unfortunately, they decided to exit the cookware business, and that put us out of reach in terms of being able to create that supply for them. But its main mass, as I've said before, is already wide open to depth for expansion. We defined a 11 million ton resource originally, and it's probably a lot bigger than that. So we'll see once we get going with the analytical results with this current drilling program on how big it might be. But as most people are aware now, we're also inspired to support creating the full lithium battery material supply chain, where the key next step is to create the midstream processing capacity. And we want to get that started in Thunder Bay because there's no shortage of lithium pegmatites throughout most of Northwestern Ontario, and make it a regional facility that could be a buyer of concentrates from other new producers. So unlike a lot of traditional mining companies, we're not just going to design it for us to use exclusively. We're going to open the door for other new producers to take advantage of the midstream processing capacity being established in Thunder Bay. And it's an ideal location because it's right on the waterfront, and that makes it easy to transport concentrates and the product, lithium hydroxide, to the end users that have expressed interest. So we're also going to try to work with Lakehead University and inspire them to do more engineering research on other ways to profit from this business in Thunder Bay. So we're now in the process of creating a subsidiary that'll be the refinery owner, and we've got quite a bit of interest now. Unfortunately, the company we announced back in April from India never got the ball rolling there, but we have a lot of other interests now, including LG Energy Solution, a major Korean lithium battery manufacturer looking to establish a facility in southern Ontario. And as I mentioned before, the government has promised them that they'll support creating the supply chain for the lithium battery materials in Ontario. As I said, no shortage of lithium pegmatites in Northwestern Ontario. So we're now planning to produce lithium hydroxide and serve that market here, and it's going to keep growing. And we also want to inspire more Indigenous business interests in developing resources that occur in their traditional territories and use some new technologies to concentrate the lithium minerals and deliver them to the refinery. And this is the model that we created back in 2016. I updated it with the highlights in red there to show even if the prices are stay between $20,000 and $30,000 a ton going forward, it'll be a very profitable business, even though now the prices are way higher than that. But once there's more production of lithium hydroxide, I think the price will come down a little bit more. And I see that as being the long-term price, $20,000 to $30,000 a ton. But you can see from the below there just how profitable this business will be going forward here. So the next steps are to start off at a modest scale. We collected a bulk sample in March of 2021, and we're now in the process of getting it processed to make the Petalite concentrates for the many glass ceramic manufacturers around the world that are interested in it. And they always need trial quantities before they'll give you a firm commitment on the offtake. But we also want to create the supply chain for the lithium battery materials. And as I said before, we're now trying to get a feel for the overall size potential of the resource. And then while we're doing that, we'll get going on feasibility study level cost estimates and plan the whole next steps there. But in the meantime, we want to produce the trial quantities of the Petalite product for the many glass ceramic manufacturers around the world that are interested, and hopefully get the battery materials production facility going by 2025 or 26. And I want to briefly mention our Lilypad project, which is near a community, indigenous community called Fort Hope. And it's a very unique resource, highly enriched in cesium and tantalum. And hopefully we'll be able to create some road access there to allow us to get production started there before long and do some more drilling on the original resource there. They're planning to build a road to the Ring of Fire, and hopefully that'll inspire creating a branch to Fort Hope to give us better access to that property. And we drilled off a dike a few years ago that has a unique form of the rare lithium mineral pollucite in that it occurs throughout the whole dike. And there's also pretty good tantalum grades in there too. So it's a unique resource, highly enriched in the rare cesium mineral pollucite. And we want to show how we can take advantage of that. And of course, lithium pegmatites like this create no harm for the environment. And lastly, this is our current management team. We added a new VP operations recently to help manage the next steps on getting the full operation started. And we also have a new investor relations consultant on our team, Celicia Ilias, and a former chief on our board of directors, Chief Harvey Yesno, who was from that First Nation at Fort Hope, Iabamatong First Nation. So that's basically it. I'll be happy to take some questions now. Thank you very much for your attention today.
Don, this is John Viglotti with OTC Markets. You have quite a few questions, so I will start reading them off to you, okay?
Okay.
Don, were you able to hear me?
I didn't hear that question. No, you're not coming
Don.
through.
Don, sorry about that. I think we can hear John, but he couldn't hear you anymore for some reason. I'm going to assume you can hear me, and I'm going to start with a question that is, what is the status of providing samples for your prospective glass customers?
Well, we've taken a bulk sample, and now we have a partner wanting to help us create the concentrates to provide them with the trial quantities that they always want to make sure it's going to meet their requirements. So that's in progress now, actually. And next steps will be to take a larger bulk sample and start producing more of that. We're planning to install a dense media separation plant on the site to facilitate production of the concentrates using a method that does not contain any chemical residues that would contaminate the petalite particles going forward. So we have an opportunity to acquire that plant now as a secondhand one and get it set up and start producing those trial quantities for the many end users around the world that are desperate for a new supply source.
Great, thank you. And the next question, with so many projects you suggested Avalon is working on, are you spreading the company too thin?
Well, no, I learned early on that being in this whole new world of non-traditional commodities, it's very hard to predict where the next big demand will come from. So that's what motivated us to create a diversified asset base so that we would have exposure to a broad range of non-traditional commodities and be able to accelerate production from one resource when we found out that there was growing demand. So right now, that's obviously our lithium resource.
Great, thank you. I've got another one here. We probably have time for two more, so this will be the second to last. Will Avalon's move to commence operations be delayed in any way by the slow development of government policy frameworks at either the provincial or federal level?
Well, everyone wants to support creating these new battery material supply chains, so I don't think it's going to be a problem to get the permits required to get production started here.
Great. And last question, and just a note out to everyone who has been submitting questions, we'll provide the questions to Don so that he could follow up with anyone that we're not able to answer. Last question. In order to secure financing, would you contemplate potential DSO, direct shipping ore, with a 50,000 T-bulk sample?
Say again?
In order to secure financing, would you contemplate potential DSO, or direct shipping ore, with a 50,000 T-bulk sample?
Well, the next sample will be 10,000 tons, and that'll be enough to provide many of the end users with the trial quantities that they always want. But the key next step was acquiring that site in Thunder Bay so we can get going on the battery materials. And we now have a lot of interest from investing partners, including LG, in getting the operations set up. And we have interesting support from the federal government, who are prepared to give us a major grant for a lot of the money we need to get the whole operation started.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We ran a little bit over, but like I said, I'll make sure that you get the rest of those questions and can follow up. If you'd like to thank the audience and wrap up, you're all set.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to talking one-on-one with some of the audience here. I gather there's going to be some one-on-one meetings set up.
Yes, great. Thank you. And